Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back into another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. Keith, talk to me, man. What are you doing?
I'm having a cranky day, so I'm in a terrible mood, and we're going to talk quarterbacks, which is not a good combination because I don't like where Seattle's at quarterback, and then I'm already in a mood. So let's do it. And those of you that are
we pushed the record button with that knowledge, with that forethought. Yeah.
So those of you that are listening or watching on YouTube, well, you know what you're getting into. I'm cranky. I had a rough day. I'm not in a good mood.
I like the idea too. I like the idea too that lately some of our YouTube listeners have been kind of cranking it up on you.
Oh, they have.
Letting you have it a little bit. It's amusing.
It's been fun. I don't know what the Myers is, but I'm intrigued by it. And like I said, I don't know what it is, but I'm very interested in to find out what that was. But somebody said that I was pulling the Myers. What was it? I was giving the Myers curse to Tariq Woolen. We'll find out. I'm still waiting for a reply. I know what that was.
We need to be able to brand that because I think there's some money there, and we need to figure out a way to find it.
So in not related to that particular conversation, the Myers curse is taking something which is relatively easy and making it hard, and taking something that's like relatively hard and making it look easy. And you have to look no further than Jason Myers, the kicker, who can make 50-yard field goals as good as anybody in the NFL, but ask him to kick an extra point, and it can be a mess, right? He does the hard stuff well, does the easy stuff poorly. That is as close to being the Myers curse. That's living up to your name right there.
That's funny.
And I can say that speaking from experience as a Myers myself. So anyways, let's talk quarterbacks today, because that's where we're going. Yeah. We started with the news today. Peter King, I believe it was from Monday Morning Quarterback, tweeted out there that Drew Brees may unretire and come to Seattle, which there's been no reports of, no follow-up. It looks like that's not going to happen. If he unretires, he's probably going back to New Orleans. He's still under contract for with New Orleans. So
even though you go through a retirement plus a year without play, you're still under contract?
Yeah, he's still under contract because he still had years left on his contract when he retired.
Those voided.
No, they don't. Because otherwise people could just retire and then not have to worry about, their contract. They could get out of any contract by retiring and then coming out of retirement. No, New Orleans still retains his rights. Is when Marshawn Lynch unretired and went to the then Oakland Raiders, the Seahawks traded him to Oakland because they still retained his rights. So that would be the case if New Orleans would have to trade him wherever he wanted to go if he came out of retirement. And honestly, he would go to New Orleans.
So I'm going to back up for half a second. I'm just going to let everyone know that we are starting a long series on position group evaluations on the team. And we were going to come in and start from the back forward and start with cornerbacks and safeties on the defensive side of the ball this year. This news came out, and we decided to talk about it a little bit. And along with that, decided to talk about the rest of the position group. So we're starting with quarterbacks the way that we have for the last 5
every
years.
Every other time.
Exactly. So here we are again.
I still want to do the defense first, but that's a whole other issue.
We can switch back.
But let's go back to the Drew Brees thing, because hearing that let's assume that the impossible happens and he does come out of retirement and he does come to Seattle to play quarterback, and he does so with no draft capital, having to go in the direction of New Orleans. Are you excited about that?
No, not really for a few reasons. I think you and I primarily, and we even had a discussion about this, I think a couple of years ago, was the idea that Drew Brees was just done. His arm had gone away. He just wasn't a great quarterback anymore. I think the idea we saw with Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh's kind of the same thing. He just ran out of gas. And I think Drew Brees, the same thing with St. Louis, or not St. Louis, with New Orleans, was that they were a playoff caliber team that could make a deep run, and it was Drew Brees that was holding them back a little bit. And that's the player that I saw the last time he took the field.
Yeah.
So that doesn't excite me. The guy's going to be 44 years old in the 2022 season, and he's going to be expensive, and he's going to take away an opportunity to look at a young quarterback that the Seahawks currently have on their roster, plus Gino Smith and a couple, Levi Lewis and Jacob Eason. So when you bring a guy like Drew Brees in, it says you're in a win now mode, and I'm not sure if the Seahawks are in a win now mode. And so none of it to me would make any sense.
I mean, the only part of it that would make sense to me is that this is a team that's not going to be good. Everybody knows they're not going to be good. No one's expecting them to be good. So they're also not going to be that interesting unless a bunch of the young players start to really rise up. You bring in a Drew Brees, and at least you're interesting.
Well, at least DK Metcalf's excited. I mean,
he shouldn't be. He actually should be more excited with Drew Locke or Gino Smith, because look, Drew Brees is a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. I don't like saying anything negative about him. And
sure,
that's before you get into the type of person he is and all the stuff he did for the New Orleans community and all of that. But the last 2 years that he was a player, he was a liability. He could not get the ball down the field. Every completion was within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. He just wasn't the player he once was. And it was obvious if you watched a game. Now, I know he had shoulder surgery, so maybe he's recovered from that and is feeling better and is thinking, his arm's going to come back a little bit and he can do a little bit more. But I would be shocked if he was able to do much. And he was never a particularly athletic guy. And at 44, he's not moving around. You better put an elite offensive line in front of him.
Which he doesn't have here.
Which he will not have in Seattle. I mean, that's one of the things people talk about Tom Brady and his ability to play, at his age. Well, there's a couple things you got to look at. He doesn't complete the ball down the field anymore like he used to. Everything is dink and dunk. He's smart. He gets the ball out quick, but it's all short and it's just, high percentage stuff. And he has an elite offensive line in front of him there in Tampa. Two things that will allow him to continue to play and continue to play at a high level. You lose the offensive line and he's going to struggle. You ask him to throw the ball down the field a lot and he's going to struggle. But they don't ask him to do either of those things. And he ends up throwing for 1,000,000 yards and a lot of touchdowns. And that's a perfect arrangement for him and Tampa. And I don't see a similar arrangement for Brees in Seattle.
Yeah, and this rumor is really just that. It's Peter King speculating based on the fact that Seattle doesn't have a set position group, if you will, at quarterback right now. He also mentioned the Panthers if the New Orleans Saints didn't have him back. So there was a lot that needed to happen for Seattle to even be in the conversation. So to me, it really isn't a strong argument to have him here, and it's not a strong likelihood that it'll end up here. So. Yeah.
Does he make the team better?
Yeah, you can make an argument for that. You can make an argument because of who he is. He's a strong
his
leader,
leadership.
capable.
Okay, I'll give you that.
He's Pete Carroll's. I mean, you could make an argument, and especially in a Shane Waldron type thing where you are trying to get the ball out quick and get the ball into space with receivers, and Drew Brees is completing something in the 70% range. I could see that. I could see that, but it's only going to be for 1 year. I mean, the guy's 44.
Yeah, I don't even know that he does, because when the Shane Waldron system, there's going to be a lot of bootlegs, a lot of throwing on the run. And I mean, Drew Brees wasn't a complete statue early in his career, but he certainly was at the end of his career. throwing on the run, doing bootlegs, all that kind of stuff. That's not Drew Brees. That's not what he does well anymore.
And he probably runs the 40 in like 5.0 right now. I mean, it's not going to be fast. It's just going to be, he's done.
Maybe
he's
with
done.
rockets strapped to it.
I think he's speculating right now because he's having late spring like delusions. And his contract was terminated at NBC. And so he's looking for a job and he's excited for his old teammates in New Orleans. He kind of tweeted that they brought in some weapons, and including Jarvis Landry yesterday, and he is speculating that it would be fun to come back, and I just don't know that if it's realistic. So I don't know, and it's particularly not realistic for Seattle. And if they did it, I would be shocked. I mean, it would really be one of those shocking things where I'm just like questioning everything that they've talked about in the offseason and building a roster for the future and all that stuff. And you bring a guy that's 44 years old in to be your quarterback. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. I would question what they were trying to do, not only this year, but next year. All right. Yeah. So here we are.
We'll talk about the quarterbacks that are currently on the roster, because there's 5, if I'm not mistaken, including 2 undrafted free agents.
Well, let's talk about the guy that was there last year that, we traded Russell Wilson. We got some draft capital. We got a quarterback in from Denver. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk about Gino Smith. Gino Smith came in, started 3 games while Russell Wilson was out with the finger injury and surgery. And we had this discussion right before we recorded, which led
you and I have very, very different memories of what Gino Smith looked like as an NFL quarterback in Seattle last year. I think you remember the Jacksonville game a little too well, and I give him 0 credit for the Jacksonville game because their defense was pathetic.
Well, on the Pittsburgh thing, and I remember the other opponent. I honestly, it's
it was New Orleans.
Okay, so Pittsburgh and New Orleans has a hard, as a tough defense. I just remember that having thought about that a little bit and wondering why I was left with somewhat of a favorable impression of Gino Smith after the season. It wasn't
you must
perfect.
Have been the only person who with a favorable.
No, I don't think that I was the only person, but I'm going to tell you what I liked. I liked the idea, and you kind of corrected me a little bit, but I'm going to repeat this anyway. I like the idea that he was running Shane Waldron's offense effectively, the way that the offense was designed to be run, more effectively, I think, than Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson is Russell Wilson. I think they did a lot of adaptation for him. I think that he got his zoomies and ran around and created, things outside of the normal offense, the way it's constructed on paper. And I thought Gino Smith did with offense, allowed plays to develop and took advantage of opportunities within the design, which means he got the ball out quick. He made good reads, good decisions, quick throws, usually on the first read. Russell Wilson sometimes go 1, 2, 3 reads, and by then everything's kind of broken down. So that is my overarching idea of what I'm thinking about with Gino Smith, is just he kind of operated within the offense. And then I thought he did a decent job, not perfect. I'm not going to say in 2 games he was less than. He didn't get the job done at the end of games to win games. He did get the Jacksonville game. The one thing I'll say about Gino is he completed 69% of his passes, and he had a 5 touchdown to 1 interception ratio. Those are all positives to me.
In 3 games, he had 5 touchdowns.
The offense was anemic, not just with Gino in there. They had some problems throughout the year, and he was a contributor to that during that time.
Like I said,
I'll give you that. I will.
His stats,
he wasn't perfect.
His stats that you cited there are highly inflated by the Jacksonville game, where Jacksonville, they didn't even show up. It was like, it was just awful. It was hard to watch, even as a Seahawks fan, because it was that bad. But the other 2 games, he was not good. And I'm not going to let you get away with saying that he was. Against New Orleans, they scored 10 points. They had 120 yards 129 yards passing. It was, it literally, that's as bad as
That's because we didn't have any running game either.
We had 90 some yards running in
and
that
our
game.
Defense couldn't get off the field. I mean, look at the time of possession in that game.
It was 10-13. It's not like the Saints did anything offensively.
They had a horrible game too. That's what made it such a...
I say the time of possession was what it was because Gino and the offense was bad. The defense actually managed to get off the field a lot in that game. They only gave up 13 points.
And we said that a lot about Russell Wilson's offense during the year too. That exact same thing that you just said. So I'm not sure if it was all Gino. Is all I'm saying.
129 yards passing. He also took 5 sacks for 38 yards. Like I just don't know.
He had 13 sacks in 3 games.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just
he was 12 of 22.
Gino, and it wasn't just New Orleans. It was our offensive line was crap too. Gino wasn't as bad at taking sacks as Russell Wilson.
Let's back up because let's look at all of this. So 129 yards passing, 84 of them were on one play where
DK Metcalf touchdown. That was the best play of the year too. That was the longest touchdown play in the NFL in 2021.
He caught the ball. He ran over some people, and he took it the distance, and all of it was yards after the catch.
Yes,
and it was 84 yards on one.
Yeah, that was way bigger play by DK Metcalf than it was Gino.
The entire rest of the game, Gino Smith passed for 65 yards.
Oh, it was horrible. Yeah.
So he was bad.
Yeah. Was that the first game that he started?
I think it was the second. I think it was the Pittsburgh game was the first one.
Okay. Yeah, because that Pittsburgh game was ugly too. I mean, let's just admit it. It was ugly. Here's the thing.
And Pittsburgh
I'm going to say Gino is slightly better than maybe you're giving him credit for, but I'm not going to completely give him credit. He was bad. Like in at least 2 of those games. In the Jacksonville game, they were so horrible. You called them a JV team prior to our pushing record. Absolutely. They were the worst team in the NFL.
Yeah. In that game, which I was saying that, his stats were inflated by that game, he threw for 160 yards. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
Against such a terrible.
Well, at least he was more efficient.
He was.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I know. Well, he had 702 yards in 3 games. So I don't know how that
3.5.
I don't know. Okay.
3.5 games because he did play in that.
So let's stop talking about what Gino Smith did in the past. What's your assessment on what Pete Carroll is saying now as far as Gino Smith has been here? He's run the offense. He knows the offense. He's a leader. He's been in the clubhouse. He's got the front runner position to get the job, and Drew Locke is going to have to take it away from him.
Well, I think that's part of that is they wanted to get Gino to resign. And he's been sitting, he's been waiting, he's been wanting a chance to become a starter. And they traded Russell Wilson. So it's like, hey, it's his spot. Oh, wait, they got Drew Locke. And so to get him to come in, they had to pay him more, including a ton of incentives, which meant that he's not going to make a tremendous amount more if he doesn't play. But they did, give him all those incentives so that he would be able to do that. And now they're talking it up that it's his job. And I think that was all part of the plan, was to give him an opportunity to be the guy. And that was part of him coming back.
Do you believe that he believes that?
Oh, I believe he believes that. I think he's working and acting as if he's going to be the starter. I don't know if the team actually believes that. I wouldn't if I was them.
Okay, so let's talk about the next man up. Let's talk about Drew Locke. Okay. This is the player that they make it sound like it's almost by design the way they talk about this guy. It's just a happenstance situation. It's a throw-in player in a larger trade for Russell Wilson. We got Noah Fant back, Shelby Harris, and Drew Locke. Pete Carroll's saying all the right things that you would want to say about a young guy coming into your system that's going to have a legit shot. In that, we love Drew Locke. We loved him coming out of college. And, he had a great run in Denver, albeit a small sample size. And we'd love for him to be able to come and do that in this offense. Okay.
Drew Locke.
So that's where it is with Drew Locke.
He has lost his job as a starter twice in Denver in 3 years.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
And it's not like they've had quarterback play that was worthwhile.
So the Denver Broncos have had issues drafting quarterbacks, going clear back to Jay Cutler and quite a few others. And Drew Locke, the latest one.
They traded for Jay Cutler.
Okay.
Jay Cutler was drafted by the Bears.
No, he was drafted by Denver and traded to the Bears backwards.
I'm thinking of it backwards.
Yeah. So Drew Locke fell in the draft. I went and watched his combine tape just before we came on today too, just because it popped up. And he's got the same problems at the combine as he does in college and in the pros. And if you don't watch and you don't pay attention, you're not going to know any of this. But he's got some footwork problems. He's got some anticipation problems. He's got some mechanic problems, and he's very inconsistent. But he's got this cannon for an arms.
Accuracy problems.
Yeah. So people compare him to Jay Cutler. People compare him to Matthew Stafford because he's got the stature. He's almost 6'4". He's 220 pounds. He's got this cannon for an arm. Okay, great. He's got all those physical attributes, and then he's got the low completion percentage. It started in college. He was around a 57% completion percentage guy early on in his career, ended up at about 61% by the time he left school. 61% in college is not good. And then the mechanic problems, the anticipation problems, those came out at this combine. When I watched the combine, and I've watched other stuff too, but I hadn't watched his combine tape. And I watched the combine stuff, and I was like, wow, he's throwing to, the combine drills, everybody. You're throwing to wide open receivers on the same routes every single time. So you literally know exactly where you're going to throw the ball on the field. All you need to do is anticipate that throw and make the completion.
Yeah, there's no defense, there's no pass rush, there's no defense on the player. You just step back, let it fly.
He was struggling with his footwork. He was dancing around because he couldn't quite get the timing right. He couldn't get the anticipation. Every throw was in a different spot. So he'd throw the same route, same receiver, and one throw would be in his feet, the other throw would be high, where the guy is just diving to catch the ball on a 20-yard completion, and it's carrying him out of bounds. Whereas the route is dictating, he tries to, he catches the ball, turns it up, runs up the sideline. So it was just a mess. He was just messy. Like every other quarterback that was on the field there was just, making those completions. And he was the guy that was just throwing all over the place. So, and that's translated to the NFL. So now we've got this guy that Pete wants to wrangle. And if you know anything about Pete, and everyone does, he's about taking care of the football. No interceptions. Efficiency is number one. He wants to be in control
the wrong
of the
guy.
whole time. Right?
This is the wrong guy.
And so I think his idea is to literally break Drew Locke down as a human being and as a quarterback and build him back up from scratch and have Shane Waldron control this guy so where they can get his completion percentage up to like north of 65. So it'd be 67, 68% would be the optimal spot where you'd want him to be. Rein him in a little bit, take the shot still. He's got that arm, but really try to focus on getting him into rhythm with this shorter passing game. That to me is the idea. I don't know about the execution here. I think what's going to happen is if Drew Locke comes out and he shows that he can kind of be that 67% completion percentage guy, he's going to get the job over Gino Smith because of his age. And I think they really want to take a look at this guy, even if they turn him into some sort of tradable asset or something. But Gino Smith has already shown that he's going to be a 67, 68% completion guy. I think maybe if you get him a better line and he's in the offense and he knows he's the starter from day one, maybe he turns into a more consistent player. I just don't know. Either way, we don't have good choices.
No,
this year at quarterback, and that's the plan.
Let's look at Drew Locke's 3 years in the league, because he played in 5 games as a rookie, and this is the 5-game stretch that Pete Carroll talked about, where he's like, "Oh yeah, if we can get him back to playing at that, he'll be great." He had 7 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. That's not going to cut it. He had 200 yards per game. That's all he had. That's not going to get it. His yards per attempt at 6.5 is anemic at best. Mm-hmm. His QBR of 50.2 is very, very unimpressive. I mean, that's not going to get it done. That was his best stretch of games as a pro. The following year, 2020, he started 13 games. He had 15 interceptions.
With the 57% completion percentage, folks.
Yeah. 57%.
That's 10%, 12% lower than Russell Wilson's average.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea.
His yards per attempt that year were 6.6. So it's not like he was only completing 57%, but he was completing everything downfield. No, he wasn't completing anything downfield.
And those 15 interceptions, like 12 of those came on attempts over 20 yards. So everything that Russell Wilson was really good at, Drew Locke is the opposite of that. And
then in this last year, he played in 6 games, but he started 3 of them. He completed 60.4% of his passes. His yards per attempt of 7.1 was the best of his career, but that's still not NFL caliber. And he was 2 touchdowns to 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
Like Drew Locke was holding that team back very, very much. He has been given and lost his job as a starter.
Yeah,
he has been given and lost his job as a starter twice. He has been
most recently to, I can't even remember his name, the other quarterback.
Teddy Bridgewater.
Teddy Bridgewater lost his job to Teddy Bridgewater. Yeah. In fact, they traded to get Teddy Bridgewater after the 2020 season because they didn't want to go into the season with Drew Locke.
Yeah. They'd already given up on Drew Locke in 2020 and benched him. Then they traded for Teddy Bridgewater to bring him in because they knew Drew Locke wasn't the answer. Teddy Bridgewater wasn't great, but he at least took care of the football and completed a higher percentage of his passes. And then when he got a chance to play, Locke looked bad, and then they finally just jettisoned him.
Being a Seahawks fan, I'm not a Denver fan. I'm not watching all those games. Do you have any idea what was going on? I mean, they stuck with him. It's not like they pulled him after 4-game sample or something. He started the last 5 games of the 2019 season. He looked decent, something that they thought maybe they could build on. Mm-hmm. He came in 2020, started 13. They rode him for 13 games, Keith.
Yeah, they were looking for him to develop. They wanted him to become a better player, with experience, to just develop. They saw enough as a rookie. They're like, okay, if that's the floor, then where's the ceiling? And we know he's got a big arm. His 2020 season, they stuck with him for 13 games, thinking that as a 24-year-old quarterback in his second year, that he was going to improve, that he was going to the game was going to start to slow down for him, and he was going to start to see things better, and that he was going to start doing better, and he didn't. He just never developed into anything. He is still the same player today that he was in 2019. So it wasn't that 2019 was great. It wasn't. It was mediocre, but it showed promise that he's never lived up to. He's still the same guy 4 years later.
And it comes down to anticipation and mechanics for him.
Yeah, it really does.
It really does, because just like he was in college and just like he has been in the pros, he has great plays. Like there are plays where you're like, oh, there's Drew Locke. He zipped that ball 25 yards across the field and made that play that nobody else could make.
Yeah,
And
he
then
put the
he
ball
has
into the
3 or
tiniest
4
window.
Yeah. And then he has 3 or 4 things where his anticipation is low. He throws it into the feet. He throws it high, sailing. He overthrows or underthrows, mostly underthrows his deep throws, which leads to a lot of those interceptions. So I don't know. I think, it's going to be an interesting year. I listened to you a couple of times. We've talked about this, about what the team record is going to be. And we're just talking in general sense. And I'm trying to be optimistic. I'm trying to see the upside of Drew Locke. I'm trying to see that 67% completion percentage Drew Locke, and things are going to work out. And we've got the rest of the roster that's kind of fun and exciting. And there's some good, quality players around the quarterback position. I'm thinking if we can just get average play, we could get above average overall offense. And so I'm thinking, okay, if I can do that, I can get to 7 or 9 wins in my head relatively easy. And the more and more that I look at this, especially after today, after the show, I'm wondering if we can even get to like 5.
I think that as a team and a roster, I'm looking at Drew Locke, and I understand. You keep saying, oh, well, he's only 26. Let's see if he can develop. I'm like, we've seen 3 years of Drew Locke in Denver, and it's not like they don't have weapons. It's not like they don't have an offensive line. It's not like they don't have a running game. They have all those things. They've also got a defense that is legit. So he's not being asked to do everything. I just haven't seen anything in Drew Locke that makes me think he is a guy that you depend on at any point. And I'm sorry. And if he comes out and proves me wrong and looks really good as a Seahawk, holy shit, I'm going to be excited. Like, I'm not rooting against the guy. I want him to be good. I just don't see it as a possibility. So I just don't see it. And I don't see it with Gino either. Gino is a guy that he's perfect as a backup. And I think that he was perfect as a backup, and he's gotten a little older and now lacks some of the athleticism that he had as a younger player, and that's hurting him. And he wasn't particularly good as a younger player. So maybe he is close to retirement.
He's 33 this year. But yeah.
Yep. And so between the two of them, I'm like, neither of them is a starter. They're both backup material. Okay, what else is there? Oh, wait. That's pretty much it as far as NFL quarterbacks. Because Jacob Eason is not an NFL quarterback. I know he played for UW and the Huskies, and he's a local favorite and all of that. But there was nothing in his college tape that looked like a pro quarterback. He has bounced around the league and practice squads for the last few years because no team wants to keep him on the roster.
Yep. And then the other guy they brought in as an undrafted rookie free agent, Levi Lewis, is 5'8".
Yeah, he's
189 pounds.
He's not a quarterback. He's a weapon. He is a guy that is going to run jet sweeps. He's going to throw off those jet sweeps. He's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. He is not a quarterback.
NFL quarterback. No, he's an exciting college quarterback.
Yeah. He's
and
fun.
He kind of reminds you of the Kyler Murray a little bit.
Well, yeah,
but
except for he's like 3 inches shorter.
Well, Kyler Murray's 5'9" or 5'10". But Kyler Murray's thicker. Thicker in the legs, thicker in the lower body, can make stuff happen. Levi Lewis is interesting. I mean, when you go watch him, he's just a small guy. Small guy. He does not look at all like a quarterback in the NFL. And so I question whether he could step up in the pocket and really complete plays. I just don't.
Honestly, when they signed him, what I saw was, I'm like, oh, I know what that is. That is a practice squad guy that is on the scout team to help them prepare for
Lamar Jackson's, Kyler Murray's, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he is quick, he's fast, he can move around, he's going to piss off defensive linemen. And that's what Kyler Murray does. Kyler Murray does that an extremely high level, but he's also got the arm talent to get the ball downfield. And
this guy's actually got a nice little arm on him. And I'm sorry I said little, but he's got a pretty good gun. But I can't get over the size. I just can't do it. If he was 5'9" and 215 pounds,
5'9" isn't tall enough. Like Lamar Murray is.
I know,
5'10".
but I'm thinking, Russell Wilson was
5'10" and a half. Lamar Murray was 5'10" and a quarter. That's to me the bottom of the height possibility. And even that is really pushing it, and you better be special athletically, and both those two guys are. If you're Drew Brees and you're 6'1", okay. 6'0", I think maybe he was closer to 6'0", 6'0" and a half. He was not elite athletically, but he had a lot of other things going for him.
Anticipation skills were just off the charts,
and his accuracy was crazy, and his release speed was very quick, and all of those things. Okay, we're back to talking about Drew Brees. Hey, the show's come full circle, but he was also 6'1.5". I mean, we're talking about a player who's 4 inches shorter.
Yeah, this guy's legit, 5'8" and 5'8", I think is what he is.
Yeah.
And he's 187 pounds. Exciting player. There's no question. You go out and watch a little bit of his tape. It's kind of fun to watch, but it doesn't translate. It doesn't, I don't think it translates. So we'll see how that goes. I would anticipate he's gone before week 2 of training camp.
I don't know. I would expect him to stick around in training camp so they can get him on.
It'd be fun
because they need someone to take all those reps in practice and get guys, get the center reps, get running back reps, get the ball to the receivers. Last year they kept 4 for most of training camp, and then dumped a bunch of guys and made some adjustments. But
okay, so I'm gonna redirect you for half a second, then we're gonna get out of here.
Cool.
Drew Locke, Gino Smith, who emerges? What happens?
Honestly, I think Gino Smith gets it. Drew Locke is going to entice some people because of his age and his arm, but when it actually comes down to getting it done on the field, he's too inconsistent. He doesn't produce results. And I think Gino Smith is going to be the guy that is consistent. He might be consistently mediocre, but he's at least consistent. And I think he'll do a better job of taking care of the football. And that's what Pete Carroll's going to value most.
I agree with everything you just said. And I kind of came to that right before the show because I was thinking about these off-season OTAs, these workouts that are going to happen in the next couple of weeks for the Seahawks, and they're really decent. They're glorified walkthroughs, but they really go kind of full speed against each other. There's no hitting or anything like that. But there's defenders on the field against offense, and Drew Locke's going to need to make throws. He's going to need to make decisions. He's going to need to make anticipatory throws. He's going to have to show his footwork. And to me, this is the couple weeks that's the most important time for Drew Locke here in Seattle, because if he can't emerge after these 2 weeks as a possible front runner for this position, it's over. It's over before it even starts, because Gino is going to be the guy in their minds, and he's going to get the reps, and he's going to get all the prep as the guy that's going to go into the season as the starter. And if Drew Locke comes out in these next couple of weeks and he was just like throwing it everywhere, and it's like, oh my God, he's way better than he was on film ever, and he can have an equal shot. But this is the time where he's going to have to come in, and I just don't see it happening based on.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either. And I want him to be good. I honestly do. I think he's 26. He's got, he was a 2nd round pick. He's got talent. There's talent there. You can't watch him play and not believe that there's not talent there. His arm is legit. I mean, it's like Matthew Stafford. And his ability to just really put some heat behind that ball. But there's also limitations. And
sometimes sometimes you got to go through it. Sometimes you got to go through the pain to see it for yourself, because here's this guy with all the stature, all the tools, and he's going to have some successes, and then he's going to have some things to work on. So you can talk yourself into something, especially early on in the process where he's literally starting over as a player in a new offense with a new coordinator, new coach, new everything. This is his new opportunity. So I think that he will be given that chance, and there will be some successes in those chances. And that might be enough to entice the Seahawks into pursuing that. And it may turn out, and it may end up going down a road that is not going to be great. And we'll just have to see.
Well, really, I mean, he's going to be given an opportunity to show that he belongs. And if he doesn't take it, his career is probably over. I'm rooting for Drew Locke. I don't want that thing that I just said to come to fruition. I want him to be able to continue to play and have a career. And
well, maybe there's an opportunity for him to be a Gino Smith of the world. I don't know. We'll see. But if you're going to be Gino Smith as a backup guy, you need to complete 65% of your throws when you're asked to, or you're not going to make it. If Drew Locke is a 60% guy or a 58% guy, those guys don't cut it in the NFL. They just don't.
What interested me in all of this is I wonder why the Seahawks, if they want a guy that's going to complete 67 or 68% of his passes or more, they don't care if it's all check downs and dink and dunk and whatever. Why Drew Locke and not Teddy Bridgewater? Because that's the problem with Teddy Bridgewater is he doesn't complete anything downfield, but he takes care of the football. It's dink and dunk stuff. He's never going to wow you with anything, but he's going to just be consistent. If you were going to go get a Denver quarterback, why didn't you get the one that actually fits the mold?
Well, I don't think that he was he under contract?
No, he's not. He could have been just signed as a free agent. Yeah.
I think that they took a flyer on Drew Locke. I think that was it. That's just the bottom line. I think when you evaluate a quarterback in the draft and that you didn't get him because you already have one, this is kind of a John Schneider to me move. It's not necessarily a Pete Carroll move. Pete Carroll's a guy that wants to take care of the ball. He wants more handedness there. He wants kind of if it's not a veteran, even if it's a rookie, he wants that veteran kind of presence out there, a guy that can command the team. I'm not sure if Drew Locke's that guy. So that's why Pete Carroll's talking him up, because he's at least giving him that shot. Mm-hmm. I think this is a John Schneider move if I've ever seen it. I don't know.
One. I think this is a Denver move. I think Denver wanted him off the roster.
Toxic?
He was no, not that. It's just it could have become toxic if he's the draft pick and the guy that's expected to be the guy and he hasn't been, and then you have to go spend all this draft capital to trade for an actual starter because Locke's failed so bad. They just didn't want that situation. I think they wanted to unload him.
Mm-hmm. I read that the Nathaniel Hackett's team, their guy, their quarterback's coach, their offensive coordinator, did their due diligence in this last offseason, watched all the Drew Locke tape, and came to the conclusion afterwards that he was expendable. And that's why he was part of that trade. I just read that today.
And they're not wrong. If you look at his tape and you look at his play and even look at his stats for his entire time in Denver, you're not building a team around that guy. There's a reason why Denver gave up everything they did for Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
because
Seattle didn't want to give up everything that they needed to give up to keep Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
and here we are.
Which is part of it, and then part of it is Russell wanted to leave, and I think that is one of those things that we need to keep saying because people are talking about, the Seattle made this big mistake and whatever. Russell wanted out. He wanted a chance to go. He wanted a chance to go somewhere else. And honestly, the Seahawks had really kind of screwed themselves over by this win now mentality, where they traded away picks for Percy Harvin, and then they traded away more picks for Jimmy Graham, and then they kept trading away first round picks for guys like Sheldon Richardson and
Jamal Adams.
Clowney and all of these win now moves, and especially when a lot of them, those guys walked a year later, like Clowney and Richardson,
or just didn't turn out,
like Percy Harvin,
and Jamal Adams.
Yeah. I mean, all of these win now moves that didn't work, they were in trouble. This roster had deteriorated. They needed draft capital. They needed a rebuild, even if it was just a minor rebuild. They needed a rebuild. And you weren't going to be able to make Russell Wilson happy this year because you weren't going to be able to put a roster around him good enough to compete. You needed a couple of years. And without the draft picks, because they didn't have the draft picks, it probably was going to be not this year, not next year, maybe the year after that. And how old is Wilson? How long is he willing to wait? He wasn't willing to wait. He wanted out. He wanted an opportunity to go continue to win now. And the Seahawks, you needed an opportunity with draft capital to start rebuilding the roster. That's where we are. As much as I don't like it, Wilson was fun. I don't see.
You get it. At what point do you hold Schneider accountable for that kind of stuff?
Is it Schneider or is it Pete Carroll? It was Pete Carroll, in my opinion, not Schneider. Those were Pete Carroll moves. When it was Schneider controlling everything, that was when he was making 200 roster moves a year and just shuffling the roster, looking for talent, trying to get guys, just mining for talent. Once they built the roster and they became, went to the Super Bowl and won it and went back to the Super Bowl and almost won it, they were just in win now mode every year, trying to run it back. And I think that was Pete Carroll saying, go get me a wide receiver.
Yeah,
go get me a tight end. Go get me this guy.
To me, and we can live in retrospect a little bit on some of the things that we just talked about. But to me, I think that's the proper move, at least in 2020, 2015, 2016. I think when you started to reset in 2017, where we jettisoned, some of the coaching staff and got rid of some of those players. I think that was the right move, so I don't know that it's necessarily been the wrong thing until it's the wrong thing. And you almost, it's too late before Now, I think when we got past the 2018 season and we kept doing those moves, then it became evident that we were kind of on the wrong path. And this draft, this offseason was the correction.
It was. And so you ended up with the Jamal Adams trade is the ultimate mistake. Not that Jamal Adams is a bad player. I think Jamal Adams is still an elite tilt the field athlete and player. And if used correctly, which Seahawks had trouble with because of their old defensive coordinator. If used correctly, he can be an absolute difference maker. But this was a team that was not ready to win at that moment. They didn't have the roster. They didn't have the talent. There were deficiencies up and down the roster, and they really needed those draft picks to address that. They needed to get younger, cheaper, more athletic, and you weren't doing that trading 2 first-round picks for a guy. They weren't ready to win at that moment. The roster had deteriorated too far. And I think so that is the mistake. The other moves, you know what? They're win now moves, whether they work out or they don't work out. So be it. The rest of the roster, of the
we
roster
did get to 12. We did get to 12 wins with that philosophy, building on it year after year. So 9 wins or 10 wins, 11 wins, then 12 wins. And then all of a sudden it's not working anymore. And it even that 12 win team was completely flawed. We knew that.
It was very flawed. Yeah. But they continued, they came back after that 12 win season without the salary cap room and without the draft capital to address the flaws. And what we got was a 7-win team that was just not as fun to watch.
Coming off 3 draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
with no real way to figure out how to get back.
Yeah. So to me, the correction, the reset was needed. I'm sorry that Wilson had to go. I love having him here. He was fantastic. He's the best quarterback in franchise history, hands down. But the franchise needed a reset. And honestly, he didn't need to be here for a rebuild. He's in the prime of his career. Go win some titles, man, or at least go compete for some titles. You don't need to sit here through a rebuild and wait for this team to catch up to you.
Especially when Pete Carroll was going to stay.
Yeah. And so I was okay with all of it. I didn't like it, but I'm okay with it.
All right, let's get out of here. I don't know what we're doing next, Keith. I don't know if we're going to go back now to our original plan and do corners and safeties and work our way back through to the offense and running backs, or we're just going to stick with the offense and do what we have always done.
I have no idea either. Let's flip. We'll flip a coin once we're off the air. We'll figure out what we're doing next week.
There we go. Okay, thanks for joining us, everybody. Good show, good conversation. You weren't as angry as you let on early. I think I calmed you down a little bit. I wasn't as argumentative on the show as I was prior. So anyway, find Keith on Twitter. Find me on Twitter. Find the show. You know where the show's at. Hit the subscribe button. Share it. All that good stuff. Thanks for joining us. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.